Do not adjust your television. What you are about to experience is stranger than fiction.
Hello, strangers, and welcome to the very first episode of Channeling Spirit's new podcast known as Stranger Than Fiction.
Woo-woo!
My name is Devin. I am the writer and editor of Channeling Spirits. Along with me,
My name is Heidi, and I am normally the voice of Channeling Spirits, but today you get two voices.
Yeah.
Woo!
So we are trying something a little bit different. If you are familiar with our YouTube channel, a lot of what we explore is pretty much the supernatural in pop culture. So we dissect a lot of Ghostbusters and Beetlejuice and monsters and all sorts of things. And we try and ask interesting questions maybe you've never asked before.
Exactly.
Like, how does that proton pack actually work?
Or why is Frankenstein green?
So if you like those subjects, definitely check us out on YouTube. We will be posting these podcasts there on YouTube as well. And so some of what we reference, there might be some images that we'll have on YouTube that obviously in a audio format, you will just kind of have to imagine, and we'll detail it as best as possible. But for this podcast, what we're going to be doing is pretty much taking various episodes of TV, and it's going to vary, or actually movies, we'll just kind of change it up. And what we're going to be doing is going back into maybe the truth. So when you hear those stories that says based on a true story, we're going to talk about not only the movie or episode, but also where that truth comes in, what the inspiration behind real monsters and ideas come from. And so what are we going to be talking about today, Heidi?
We are going to be talking about doppelgangers.
Doppelgangers. So doppelgangers pop up in all sorts of things.
Yes.
They're in a lot of really prevalent movies. So I made a brief list. You have like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Ugh. That's, pretty terrifying one. You have something like The Thing, an alien that's taking over and looking like other people. And there's one movie that you really like that kind of has a doppelganger.
Yes, Black Swan. It's not exactly her doppelganger, but it is about, someone else taking over and kind of filling that role in her life that she was trying to do. So kind of relates. Yeah,
so it's maybe a metaphorical or a psychological doppelganger. So there's a lot of different types of doppelgangers. Pretty much, if you're not familiar with the concept, it's kind of an alter ego, a double. Sometimes it's considered a spiritual double. Sometimes it's quite literally a physical double. And you have a lot of shows and movies that really explore that. The one that we're going to be talking about today is actually from the Real Ghostbusters, probably my favorite episode. It's called Citizen Ghost. Oh. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more on why I like it so much.
Okay.
So that's going to be the topic. What we're talking about today is Citizen Ghost and the Spectral Ghostbusters, or their doppelgangers in that. And then we'll talk about the history behind them and maybe some real life doppelgangers, both from history as well as some encounters that we have had, or at least I've had. So Heidi, why don't we start with a segment that I like to call
Heidi's Dissection.
Oh gosh.
So
Okay.
Go ahead and break down, cut apart this episode.
Sure. So in the beginning,
How much do you actually remember?
Some of it.
I told you to take notes.
Essentially, a reporter comes and is like...
Cynthia Crawford.
Cynthia Crawford. I'm sorry. Cynthia Crawford. She has red hair and brown eyes. I did remember that detail because I also have red hair and brown eyes.
These are the important facts, people.
Yes, absolutely. She comes and she's like, hey, I'm going to interview Peter Venkman. And... So she goes upstairs and it's like, I want to know, more about you, what you do in your free time, and he brings up Slimer in the story of how they keep Slimer as not really a pet, but just kind of they keep him around. He's not contained or anything like that. And they talk about the origin of how that came to be. And what happened is Egon told Peter to throw away their old suits. They got the new suits because they're the real Ghostbusters now. Can't be wearing that old suits from the movie.
By the way, Peter, did you remember to burn those old uniforms like I asked you?
So he told him to get rid of them. And he didn't, and they had ectoplasmic energy, and they were put next to the containment unit.
Yeah.
And there was a hole in the containment unit, and some of that seeped through onto the suits, so the suits became ghostly charged, I guess you'd say. Ectoplasmically charged? I'm making up words.
No, I like it.
And they essentially, each suit belong to a Ghostbuster, and so a ghost version of them, or a doppelganger version of them, appears and tries to fight them off. And so the battle is just them going back and forth on how do we beat our own versions of ourselves. They have our suits, our equipment, but they're shooting out ectoplasmic energy instead of non-ectoplasmic
proton
energy.
streams.
But yeah, and in the end, Slimer kind of sacrifices himself to help distract them and drain all of their energy, and that's why they end up keeping him around as a pet or a familiar
mascot. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the episode pretty much in a nutshell.
That's not bad.
Thank you.
So if you were going to review this episode, obviously I said I'm a huge fan of it. How 1 out of 10 spirits? We don't have a better measuring system. Maybe we'll come up with one. Give me a number, 1 through 10. How many spirits would you give this episode?
So
no.
I'm not a big fan of the Real Ghostbusters. No offense to Devin.
Oh, I can show you some bad episodes if you want to see some real
it's
comparison.
It's just not my forte. So I would give it maybe a 3 or 4 out of 10 spirits.
And we lost all the Ghostbuster fans right there.
I'm so sorry.
I don't have to take this abuse from you. I got hundreds of people dying to abuse me.
No, that's interesting, from an outsider perspective. Because it was written as a kid's show. I would give it 8 or 9 spirits. In my opinion, it's probably, and I think a couple at least people I've seen on Twitter have agreed with me, this is one, if not the best episode of the Real Ghostbusters. And I think part of that comes into, and I tried to look into this. This really, in my opinion, should have been the first episode. It's a good
intro episode.
It's perfect because it literally goes from, okay, wait, why is Slimer with them? Why is he Slimer? And they go through the name because in the original film, they just mention, Ray very quickly says Slimers when he's talking about the containment unit. He's talking to Winston and he's going, this is where we keep all the spirits and specters and Slimers.
This is where we store all the vapors and entities and Slimers that we trap.
And it's just this kind of one-off line. So it's weird that they'd be like, we're going to name a character Slimer. And so they talk about, hey, yeah, the Ghostbusters named him Slimer, and this is how they got their random multicolored suits, and what happened to their tan suits, and, the containment unit's fixed, and it looks different, and all of those are answered. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next segment.
Hold on, wait.
What?
I have questions about the episode.
Oh my God, this is why you should have taken notes.
So questions about the episodes. Everyone has different hair color. Egon is blonde. Ray is redhead.
Yeah.
What? Why?
I never really thought about this as a kid watching it. It was just kind of yeah, that's what it is. If I had, I don't know if this is ever
diversity.
Well, that's not really through white guys, but I think it really comes down to probably kids being able to differentiate, because in the movie they're all just brunettes. Egon has glasses, so I think making Egon blonde, making Ray a redhead but more portly, it was just you as a kid, and different uniform colors, then you could identify them a lot easier.
Okay.
It's when the Ninja Turtles, who all had red bandanas in the comics, they made them a TV show, and they're we got to give them different colors, and their belt buckles have to have their initial on them and different things. So I think that's where it comes down to.
Okay.
If anyone knows the absolute definite reason, that's just kind of my gut. But
Merchandising. Tell me I'm wrong. And then I guess my other question is, Slimer sounds like a gremlin. That's not a question, that's a statement. But Slimer sounds like a gremlin.
I am going to blow your mind.
Okay.
It is voiced by the same voice actor.
That makes sense.
You know how I've told you about Frank Welker.
Yes.
If you are not familiar with Frank Welker,
Frankie.
look up his IMDb. He is...
he does everything, right?
Yeah. Like, if you grew up in the 80s, 90s, even now, he voiced, like, Megatron, Dr. Claw. He's actually the voice of Ray. That's, like, Frank Welker's, like, real voice. So it's funny, like, when he's talking to Slimer, he's like, oh, la, la, and he's like, what's that, Slimer? And it's like, you're just talking to yourself, Frank. You're not fooling anyone. But I think my favorite Frank Welker anecdote is, like, someone had, like, very, like, pithily said, like, The Lion King. They're like, yeah, for the roars of the lion, there was just some guy named Frank screaming into a bucket. And there's actual, and maybe if I have it on the YouTube side of this, I'll show a little clip of Frank Welker screaming, like, lion noises into a bucket. Because it's Frank Welker who made the Lion King lion noises.
Wow.
Great. Yeah, that was good.
But also Gremlins and Slimer and so many more.
Okay, well, now you can move on.
Okay. All right, so moving on to a segment we call Behind the Screams. So I talked to J. Michael Straczynski, who wrote this episode.
Oh.
And by talk to, I mean I wrote him something on Twitter. So I was really interested because, and we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go further in, but one trend that I've seen a lot, especially in the superhero genre, is it's flooded with this idea of you have the hero who has a power, and then their main antagonist is the same exact thing, but bad. They have the same power, but bad. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but just kind of hold on to that.
Okay.
I had asked J. Michael Straczynski, I said, so many questions about Real Ghostbusters to condense. Why wasn't Citizen Ghost the clear pilot? Any specific origin to the Spectral Ghostbusters, or one of the simply Straczynski originals? Considering the MCU overindulgence on doppelganger villains, same power but evil, would you have changed it? J. Michael Straczynski actually replied and said, there wasn't a pilot, just a first episode written. Sony pulled the trigger on 13 network and 65 syndicated, so there was no need for a pilot to get that order. And I think I had to work my way up to Citizen Ghost. To the rest, as in the rest of the questions I asked, no, there wasn't much of a specific origin for the Spectral Ghostbusters, and he also said that it wasn't much of an issue as far as overindulgence on doppelganger villains back then.
Got it.
So I was really hoping that like I would get like where did the Spectral Ghostbusters come from? Because it was I think a really unique idea in the 80s, and that's been overplayed. So can you, at least off the top of your head, kind of like list off any like superhero villains that are exactly the same as like a superhero? I'm sure as I start to go into this, you'll be like, oh yeah.
Why don't you start?
So you remember when we were watching like CW's The Flash?
Of course.
Who was the main
Oh,
villain?
yeah. Anti-Flash.
Reverse Flash.
Oh.
Like
I call him Anti-Flash.
Literally, his name is Reverse Flash. You can't get more like doppelganger
I like
than
his
that. His little
hand thing.
Zoomy hand. And then the second season was
Zoom.
which was also a speedster. And the third season was
Not Zoom. I forget.
another speedster. So like the first 3 seasons of Flash are literally the main antagonist is the same superpower as the hero. And I don't know if you watched the first season of Arrow.
No.
Their main antagonist for the first season is a guy who's called Dark Archer.
Oh.
So again, same exact power.
Interesting.
But, I mean, if you want to call archery a power, shots fired Hawkeye.
Ho.
But then, like, you talk about, like, the MCU. Like, so you have Iron Man. You remember, like, the first bad guy from the Iron Man film?
You know, you're asking me these questions, and of course I know the answers,
but
but my mind just goes...
But I like hearing your descriptions, like Anti-Flash.
We just watched the second one, so that's all that's on my mind.
Well, it was a big
it was
guy.
just a bigger a suit.
It's Ironmonger as
okay.
opposed to Iron Man,
Okay.
which is again a big guy in a suit. The Hulk in the Incredible Hulk fought Abomination, which was just a big green monster.
Yes.
Same thing as the Hulk. If you go to Captain America, he's fighting Red Skull. He's just a super soldier but evil. Loki and Thor are both Asgardians. Now you can like say like there's like, at least some difference.
Loki's
in
way
power.
different. No, I love Loki. Yeah.
Point being is, and like Ant-Man and Yellow Jacket, both are shrinking people. Like, you just had a lot of that repetition of...
I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Now I don't think people are creative.
Well, and I'm sorry if any of our viewers have also just had their glass shattered, but yeah, sadly, I think that's just kind of... I think it was interesting, and then they've really overplayed it. Like, do you know Bizarro from Superman?
No. You know I don't like Superman.
But like Bizarro, I think he was created in the 1950s or 60s. He was kind of like one of the first ideas of like, he was like literally Superman, but like he was just dumb and he would say things the opposite. So when he meant to say yes, he would say no. And he's like, me am not Bizarro.
Is he Yoda?
No, he's just dumb.
So he's Bizarro Jerry.
Bizarro Jerry?
Yeah, like Bizarro Superman. Superman's exact opposite. Who lives in the backwards Bizarro world. Up is down, down is up. He says hello when he leaves, goodbye when he arrives.
Shouldn't he say bad bye? Isn't that the opposite of goodbye?
No, it's still goodbye.
Like, instead of heat vision, he would have like ice vision and I think flame breath. At least in one iteration, it was like whatever the opposite of Superman. And like, that was funny. But then it just became like, what if Flash was just evil? We're going to have him be a
I want him to fight someone who's just super slow.
There's a character called the Turtle, and that is his power.
Oh.
He has, instead of the Speed Force, he has the Still Force.
Okay.
But this podcast is not about superheroes, so we'll try and get back on track. My point being is Doppelgangers have kind of been overdone, at least from that standpoint. But, we'll refocus.
Would you count the Parent Trap as doppelgangers?
I mean, no, those are twins. Identical twins.
Just asking. One's evil, one's not.
Okay, well, I don't have too much more to add before we move on. One interesting and kind of sad thing was we talked about Cynthia Crawford, the news interviewer reporter.
Oh, right, yes.
So
red hair, brown eyes.
Yes, red hair, brown eyes. If you grew up in the 90s and you remember that Spider-Man animated TV show that I've made you watch,
yes,
she voices Aunt May in it.
Ow.
Yeah, and then sadly, almost exactly a year ago today, on March 31st, 2020, she sadly passed away.
Oh.
So this was not intended to be a sad episode, but yeah, unfortunately, and I think it was due to circumstances relating to 2020 that she might have passed away.
COVID.
Don't quote me on that, but yes. So sadly, we did lose her, but she, I think, was great in this. She did a lot of other voices. I know she did like Cindy Bear from Yogi Bear and a lot of other things, as well as many of the voice actors here, just very prolific. But the only other thing I wanted to mention about this episode is it's one of the few Real Ghostbusters episodes, or like anything in the Real Ghostbusters, that mentions Gozer.
We just stopped Gozer the Gozerian from flattening the world.
Oh, yeah, they did.
So they mentioned Gozer. I think there's maybe the Collect Calls to Cthulhu, where they say, like, Cthulhu makes Gozer look like Little Miss Sunshine. And that's off the top of my head the only mentions of Gozer, because when the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man shows up, and he does in quite a few episodes, like, he's his own dumb character. It's like never actually Gozer manifesting. Like, it's just like another Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and he's just giant and dumb, but like it's not Gozer.
Okay.
So it's always interesting. They never explain like how Stay Puft came back. They're just like, yep, he's there. He was in the containment unit the whole time. So yeah. So now I want to move on to our next segment called
The Truth.
Much as you try to bury it, the truth is out there.
Maybe I'll like dramatically have like sound effects make like echoey and like ooh, yeah, something like that. So I want to talk about like where doppelgangers come from.
Yes.
And how they've kind of evolved over time, because it's interesting because doppelganger is a German word.
I knew that. Doppelganger.
Doppelganger. Sorry to anyone German, we are not trying to make fun of you, but it's a compound noun that's actually two different nouns. So there's doppel, and obviously I'm saying this with a very American accent.
Doppel.
And we're going to stick to our American accent because that's how we know how to do it, which means double. And then ganger, which means walker or goer. So you have double goer, double walker, someone who is walking, that is your double, etc., etc.
Insane.
So the first appearance of this term, which actually when it originally appeared was Doppelganger, there's a little T added to it. I'm not a fluent German speaker, so I can't tell you the difference between Doppel and Doppelt, but just fun fact there. And I am going to screw up this name, so I apologize to anyone that knows how to say this specifically, and I'll probably just say it once and we'll just move on from there. But the first appearance was in 3 volumes by a man named Seibenkaus.
Cool.
Seibenkaus. We're gonna go with there. I'm reading what I wrote. I did not phonetically find out how to spell Seibenkaus or say Seibenkaus, but we're just gonna kind of go with that. So it was a book, and this was published, like I said, in 3 volumes from 1796 to 1797. So it's about Seibenkaus, who is unhappy in his marriage, and he meets with his friend Lebgeber, we're going to go with that, who is his doppelganger, or Doppelganger in the story. So Lebgeber convinces Seibenkaus to fake his own death, allowing him to meet a new woman, Natalie, that one's real easy, who he falls in love with. So I don't know what happens, but I think it would have been super Shakespearean if the wife then fell in love with
the doppelganger,
Lebgeber. Mm-hmm. I couldn't find that is what happens, but I think that would be almost be cute.
It's kind of like the show that Paul Rudd's in,
I guess,
where he has a member.
But the unhappy Paul Rudd, I don't think ever found a happy ending.
Yeah, no,
It's
kind of a depressing show.
Yeah. So. That was the first iteration of it, and it's quite literally it sounds like from this story a man who looks exactly like him, but it's a real person who had his own name. He had his own identity. It just so happened that's kind of where Parent Trap comes in. So I guess when you're asking, was Parent Trap a doppelganger story? I mean, from the original context, yeah, a little bit. But the idea of doppelganger being a paranormal concept is actually very recent. Mm-hmm. So the idea that we probably, or anyone familiar with the paranormal think of, is actually an Irish term called fetch.
That is so fetch.
Have you ever...
Stop trying to make fetch happen.
Oh, I knew you were going to do it. So a fetch was a supernatural double, and it was sometimes maybe the apparition of a living person. And usually, if you saw your doppelganger, it was an omen of death. It's kind of like hearing a banshee cry. Ooh. If you saw your doppelganger, things not going well.
Okay.
Or if you saw a fetch, I'm sorry. And that has kind of transposed into doppelganger. Huh. So that idea kind of now holds true, that sometimes if you see your doppelganger, or if you've heard that comes from the Irish folklore of the fetch. So what's interesting is... there's been many reports from various historical figures seeing their doppelgangers, and there's 2 in particular I thought was interesting. Both poets. So the first is John Donne, who of course I know you know John Donne, Heidi.
Yeah, we're best friends.
Have you ever heard No Man is an Island unto himself?
Yes.
That is from a poem by Don John.
Got it.
Or Death Be Not Proud.
Is it Don John or John Don?
Did I say Don John?
Yeah.
Oh dear. It is
Ron John Surf Shop.
Don Juan, Don John, Juan. Anyway, it is John Dunn.
Dunn.
Not Don John.
Okay.
Not Long John's.
Got it.
Not Ron John.
Got it.
Now you've got me so confused. So he actually, and this is a kind of a sad story, so I will preface that to you. He saw his wife's doppelganger in 1612, the same night as the stillbirth of their daughter. Sorry, I know. So kind of going into the, sometimes it can, maybe be an omen of something unfortunate. And the other, maybe even more interesting one I find is Percy Bysshe Shelley.
Mm-hmm.
And you know him.
Of course.
You actually do know him.
I love him.
So Percy Shelley, in June 23rd, 1822, he had a nightmare about the house he was staying at flooding.
Okay.
And that'll come back into play in a little bit, but just kind of keep that in mind that he had this nightmare about a house flooding. Then he also met his doppelganger.
Okay.
Who came up to him and said, "How long do you mean to be content?" Which is weird, and Percy definitely probably had some psychotic episodes, and I mean that in the very clinical sense of, probably some mental illnesses where he might have had visual and auditory hallucinations that might have been brought on by, mental health or psychosis, or maybe some of the laudanum or all sorts of drugs and alcohol he was doing. What makes it weird is someone else also saw the doppelganger.
I thought he dreamt it.
No, he had a nightmare about the house flooding.
Got it. And then he
literally saw the doppelganger. This was verified by another woman. And then, so that happened on June 23rd. On July 8th, that's when he drowned. So I don't know if the house flooding was kind of an omen as well. I also find it really weird that his doppelganger was like, "How long do you wish to be content?" Boom, I'm out. I'm just going to leave that with you.
Do you think that doppelgangers... So I've heard stories that doppelgangers are never good. They're never, ever good.
No.
And if you see one, it means that they're trying to take over you. Like, they want to take over your life.
That's very, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, pod people.
I don't like it.
Oh.
Or do you think that maybe, your doppelganger is from... another dimension, another planet, another version of you.
I want to table that because we're going to kind of get to that in the next section, but I want to talk about my personal experience, which you can verify because you were there. This was actually the year we met. This was a couple months after we had met. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I will be posting a picture of this and you can kind of decide yourself. But it's not just the physical similarity of my doppelganger, but I want to talk about it. So in 2014, I was working at Walt Disney World. We both were. And boy. And I met a young man who looked exactly like I did.
Who was a guest.
Yes, they were a guest or someone just visiting the park. And he looked very similar, I would say almost exactly like I did when I was in 8th grade. So I used to have my hair in kind of this flat, bowl cut. I had transition glasses. He had a little sweatband on, just kind of this goofy, gangly looking guy. And I jokingly came up to him and said, "I'm you from the future." And we got to talking, and it turns out his name is also Devin, which a lot of people, when I say my name's Devin, they will spell it Devon. I get that all the time.
Devon.
My spelling is Devin. We both spelled it the same, which was kind of weird, at least for us. He also had braces, which at that time, I had braces. And what's even weirder is we both had... Our older brothers, who both had dark hair, had the same name. And for the privacy of my older brother, I'm not going to mention it, but it was the exact same name, spelled the exact same way, which was weird too. And when we went to pose for a picture, we both did this goofy thumbs up thing, unprompted. It wasn't something we planned to do. It's just we both instinctually did this stupid little thumbs up. And again, I will have that picture on YouTube. And you guys, and I'll try and do maybe some compare and contrast with some old pictures, but... it was really weird.
Yeah. I guess my question is, are you the evil version or is he?
I don't know if there always is an evil version.
Did I end up with the evil version? Probably.
So that was kind of my weird doppelganger experiences. It wasn't, I would say, a literal identical twin, but that I saw almost my past self as a doppelganger of sorts, which was really weird.
Yeah.
So that's where I was gonna segue into our final segment, which is I want to believe. Now I'm a believer. And the question is, do you believe in doppelgangers, and to what extent? What do you think maybe they are, or do you think it's just hey, biologically, two people inevitably are going to look like each other?
Ooh, I don't know, because I've heard stories that
What stories?
People claim to be true about how this guy thought he was seeing his wife like in their house, but the wife was at work and he was very confused, and she did like followed the same routine and like cradled their child. Just like really weird stories that I've heard that people claim to be true. You know, whether it's true or not, you know, that's unsure, but I've heard a lot of doppelganger stories. I have never had a doppelganger experience. I don't want to have a doppelganger experience. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'd say possibly. I mean, you know, you obviously met yours, but is it whether it's an evil entity or not? I definitely, you know, could see it there being someone from like another dimension. I know that sounds really far-fetched, but like alternate planets, you know, like are there alternate versions of me out there? Is there a possibility that we could cross over? Like you mentioned though, DNA-wise, like is it possible the two people look similar? Yes.
Because I believe that there's literally like a website you can go on where you can like upload a photo, and now with facial recognition software, that'll like find a match that like, hey, this person looks very similar or identical to you. Mm-hmm. Of course, you're given a whole lot of software, even more of your face that probably already has your face, but I know that software does exist where you can, like, if you wanted to find a doppelganger of sorts.
Good. No.
No?
Well, what if they're prettier than me?
Oh my goodness. Well, if they're your doppelganger, they should look as pretty as you.
Well, you know, it's like the twin theory where there's like one twin, even though they're identical, like one's prettier than the other. Mary-Kate and Ashley.
I've never heard that.
Oh, yeah.
Which
Ashley was way prettier.
I can't tell the difference. Well, they're not identical, though.
Oh, I thought they were.
No, whatever
paternal.
I think paternal
yeah.
is the non-identical, and they are technically paternal, which is interesting in and of itself, but they're not technically identical. So I guess that would make sense then, that why one would be prettier.
Well, regardless, I do not wish to meet my doppelganger. I definitely think it's possible. Whether they're an evil entity trying to take over me, I do not know. I do not want that. So,
do you think like there's any possibility that there's like a non-malevolent doppelganger out there?
Yeah, like DNA speaking.
But I mean, okay, like let's get past the
who do people say I look like?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying like, okay, go into kind of the supernatural concept of a doppelganger, not the very literal. Obviously, from a genetic standpoint, someone's going to look like you. Do you think there is a benevolent or just a non-malicious type of doppelganger? No, you're just
straight up evil.
If it's a supernatural
if it's here,
force,
it's coming for me.
It looks like you. There's no gray.
Yep. Well, if it's me, one of us would try to kill the other. So.
Oh my god.
I'm just So no. I don't believe there's a non-malevolent doppelganger out there for me. If there is one, she's coming for me. So.
Oh dear. I think you brought up an interesting thing about I think you go into like the parallel Earths theory of like quantum mechanics, and like makes me think of like Rick and Morty, which I know you don't care that much for, but like they play on that, like they have a whole council of Ricks. So like all these Ricks from all these universes have gotten together, but like then there are even like evil-er Ricks. So I mean, I guess, you know, maybe somewhere in the future, you know, or some universe that's figured out how to bend in between other multiverse universes, and you could all gather together and have your own army of Heidis.
I'm good.
But in your scenario, you just inevitably would be like, no, we're gonna...
I think it'd be weird to meet another version of myself. I don't know.
Like you from another Earth, you think would be weird? You don't think you would get along at all?
I don't know. It depends what choices she made in life.
Oh, okay. Let's say like she almost made like the exact same choices, except when it came time to, hey, I'm going to cross into this other universe, you said no and she said yes. Everything was same until that point. You're sitting at a doorway and she decided to walk through and you didn't. And she walked through into your universe.
I don't know.
You're not fun.
What if I saw her version of Devin? Then I'd be like, do I want that version of Devin or the version of Devin I have at home?
I don't really know where I'm at with doppelgangers. I think they're an interesting concept because they've kind of evolved, one from a standpoint of like the fetch into our idea of a doppelganger, or at least kind of from a Western standpoint. But then you also have kind of the more, as I was talking about, like comic lore doppelganger, which, to your point, is always kind of an evil double. So I don't know if I quite buy into that there is literally a supernatural entity or entities or apparitions that are out there running around being people's doubles. I think it's really weird. Like, the Percy Shelley story is really weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I would definitely have kind of chalked it up to like, he was probably on like some sort of substance abuse. But that someone else saw it, and that there were kind of omens too.
Well, what if there's another spirit, like, mocking you, like, saying, like, taking your form, saying, like, oh, I am this person. You know how ghosts normally take the form of, like, children, so they seem more,
I will never...
Not ghosts, but demons.
I will never say things are not possible, but I am healthily skeptical. And
that's fair.
For me, in my experience, and further down the line, we'll talk about, some of our experiences, because we've had some interesting stuff beyond just kind of a younger kid that looked a lot like me and had some weird quirks. In my experience, nothing has given me evidence to believe that there is some sort of spirit or dimensional double or demon or whatever that would have reason to want to look like someone. And I have not heard any personal anecdotes from people I trust. And that's the thing that's interesting is, anecdotal evidence is debatable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if me telling my story about this doppelganger that I met and the picture that I have, I'm sure a lot of people could provide, some very rational explanation of there's a lot of coincidence there and that's really weird, but that at the end of the day is just really weird.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you start to get into supernatural stories that someone's telling, there's always memory at play. Like, you can have faulty memories, and you can have people that just misremember or missaw, or it was whatever, that you can kind of discount that. But I've never even personally heard a story from someone, and I always kind of mistrust when I heard from someone that heard from someone.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm kind of...
I say we label this one skeptical.
Skeptical. So we're curious. Let us know, what your stance is on doppelganger. Have you yourself had a doppelganger encounter? I'd be really interested, because I think this is something that gets us explored a lot in television and movies, especially now as we talked about with Marvel, and DC Comics and comics in general. So I'd be curious on what other people's experiences are, what their theories are, especially if you've encountered something really out there with doubles. But overall, just kind of swinging back to the Real Ghostbusters. So if you thought this one was bad, can I force you to watch any other ones?
Sure.
I mean, it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But we're not just gonna go over the Real Ghostbusters. We're gonna be going over kind of a lot of different movies. Things like I recently thought like the Mothman prophecies. I don't think you've ever seen that. But we can talk about the real story behind the Mothman, which is, if you have not seen that movie, it's a great movie. There's definitely some stretches of truth. Things like Jaws was inspired by some real life great white attacks. So some movies we'll definitely explore. We'll also explore stuff like Supernatural, the show.
Sabrina,
The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, maybe. Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
yes.
A lot of various shows. We'll try and pull from various sources. So if you're not a fan of the Real Ghostbusters, like Heidi, we will be exploring some other material. If you are a fan of any of these shows, we are going to be kind of covering a lot of different material, but make sure to check back with us. We're going to try and do this, I hope, once a month. Maybe twice a month if we can. We're going to try and do this a lot more frequently, especially if you watch us on YouTube. We can kind of, hopefully hold you over while we're getting our video essays. But if this is the first time you've ever heard of us, be sure to check us out on YouTube. We do explore a lot of things and do what I think are very interesting video essays, voiced by the lovely...
me.
Heidi. And so thank you so much, guys, for checking us out. This is going to be an exciting new project that we're going to continue for as long as we can. So once again, my name's Devin from Stranger Than Fiction.
My name is Heidi.
And thanks so much for joining us.
Bye.